So it sounds like the average person might have some difficulty with this, correct? Is it advisable that you get a web development company or a web development team to help you through this process?
Yeah, I think this day and age, Drupal used to be much more of a hobbyist platform years ago. I think more and more the kinds of, if we talk about people using Drupal, it's more often than not, it's going to be organizations, companies, they're investing in their web presence and their platform and what they're doing with it. They probably also have some developers on their team anyway working with it, because Drupal isn't an easy system to use by any, definition. It's very powerful. Get the most out of it. You got to really dive in there in a lot of cases. So, but that doesn't mean necessarily your team is well equipped to handle something as big as like a major version upgrade. They may not have done one before. They're not sure how the process goes. If you have the bandwidth and time and energy and resources to, help your team go through that process, well, that's great. There's going to be a lot of institutional learnings there, and they're going to learn a lot about Drupal at a very core level by going through the process. You're not going to learn. There's no way to learn more about Drupal than trying to upgrade from one version to the next. I promise you. It's really getting it to the heart of how all those systems interact. But let's say your team at your organization has a lot of other responsibilities, like continuing to develop your products and systems, day-to-day stuff. Taking all that time to work on the upgrade may make it difficult for them to focus on other critical aspects of the business operations. So looking at it from that standpoint, it can be highly beneficial to have, an outside team augment your team, to help with that area that they have really critical experience with already, to get that done in a much smoother fashion, to kind of get it done quicker, with less pitfalls being fallen into and problems, help kind of navigate that path much more successfully. And there's a lot of value to that.
So say I do get a really good team on this, they're experienced, they've been through this. It sounds like even each part of the upgrade or the migration, if you will, can take either a single line of code or 20 lines of code or even more than that. That sounds like it could take a really long time. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah,
Well,
it really depends.
how long are we expecting?
And it's neat that you mentioned migration there, because in the way that me and my teams have always approached it is, it's often a migration and an upgrade built together. And that's largely because in Drupal's history, each major upgrade has been rather tremendous in size. Drupal 6 to 7 was a huge change in a lot of key systems. Like, the introduction of like the database API changed fundamentally how the core of like Drupal worked, is big. So a lot of stuff had to be refactored and redone code-wise, custom modules and stuff. Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, also a monumental change. One of the biggest pieces of that was significant parts of the code base were now taken out and replaced with essentially like third-party code, like the Symfony framework for PHP, which had a number of benefits, but created, more work might be one way to put it, but it's always about pros and cons, right? That made it so like Drupal was now taking advantage of other people's work, so that kind of core new features could be focused on by a Drupal core team, and other things that are like, you don't want to reinvent the wheel for it, that's already taken care of. You can just borrow the code that's already done in Symfony. That's a really neat idea. Furthermore, it's really popular, and there's a lot of developers out there that use it. That makes it easier for other people to come into the Drupal community and start working on Drupal and have familiarity with this big system has a big place in the PHP programming community. PHP is a programming language on which Drupal is largely built upon. So that was huge. But to give kind of some very short backstory, the Drupal community and community leadership recognized that these big upgrades were really disruptive, because they take a long time, take a lot of investment and resources, and not everybody was really happy about that. So there was a big organizational and strategic focus with how the Drupal project was going to be managed in the future, which was to make it more streamlined and predictable and sustainable and going through these upgrade processes. So beginning with Drupal 8 to 9 was going to follow a very set sequence of minor upgrades and releases to the major upgrade. And there would be a release schedule, and you'd know what's coming. But another key thing here was to make it so that when it was time to get to Drupal 9, it wasn't going to be a huge monumental change. It was, if you had kept up with all these updates And through each of these updates, new things were added, but also things were deprecated, just not turned off. They were just indicated as this will go away with Drupal 9, just so you know. If you kept up with those minor releases and upgrades all through that process, of course, of several years, when it came time for Drupal 9 and you were already at the last, minor release for Drupal 8, which was 8.9, it effectively, you are there. From 8.9 to 9, all it does is turns off all the stuff that was deprecated. So if you kept up with those minor updates all along the way, no work to be done, which is really beautiful.
If you did that, it is the press of a button.
Yeah, effectively.
What about
Did everybody do that though?
What about those who are still on 7?
7 to 8, like I said, is a big architectural change. So that's still more in the vein of the previous types of projects. Yeah.
Okay. So is it fair to say that if you're still on Drupal 7, it's going to take quite a bit longer to upgrade to Drupal 9?
It's going to take work. Okay. That's for sure. How much is really dependent on how big your site is, how many modules you're using, how much custom code, how many different libraries and integrations you have. As those things increase, so will the effort required to do it properly and without having things blow up in your face down the road, right? I say that colorful expression, and it may not be the best, but that's kind of how it feels when you have systems you rely upon on your website. There's bugs and they just don't work. In the Drupal space, anybody been a Drupal developer for a long time to know about with the white screen of death. He's like, this is broken. I don't know why. Sucks to be me. So yes, a Drupal 7 to Drupal 9 upgrade can be an extensive project if you have a really large website, or even have multiple websites that are all part of a suite of Drupal websites working together, right? That can be pretty lengthy. I mean, if you have a website that's using Drupal and Drupal 7, that all it does is uses core content types. So what are content types? It's like, a basic page or an article content. It's like a post type in WordPress. It's just a way to show content on a page, right? And you don't have any contributed modules. And all you basically did with the website was create pages like blogs. Upgrading that is not going to be hard, right? That's going to be pretty easy. Most people don't act that way with their website, though. They like, oh, this module, I could use that. This module, I could use to do that. And that just creates complexity. And not all those modules that you use in Drupal 7 have a counterpart in Drupal 8 or 9. And that's one of the areas of difficulty, is if somebody didn't, the maintainers for the modules didn't continue that work, or decide, hey, we're not going to continue this after Drupal 7 for reasons. Now you need to find an alternative. And that may require further changes to how your website works. So that's a piece of that puzzle.
Hi, this is Sarah from Denver Data Web. Thanks for watching. Please like our video and subscribe for future digital strategy chats. You can also visit our website at denverdata.com or find us on social media at Denver Data Web.